Hi guys and welcome back to the Mighty Blues. My name is of course Cameron and welcome back today to another video. It is going to be the player ratings video for the entire 2019-20 season. We're going to go through every Everton player that played in either the Premier League or the Cup competitions, and we're going to rate them between 1 and 10. Now, I've rated these slightly different to how I'd rate them usually after every single game. Obviously, I'm rating them in comparison to each other, so if somebody gets a 7 out of 10, it doesn't mean that they've been, you know, absolutely unbelievable this season. It just means that in regards to the rest of the squad, they've been better than most players. I want to say the lowest score, I think, is a 2 in this scale, and the highest score I've given is a 9. 2 being absolutely, you know, completely disappointed with and they've had a dreadful season. 3 being quite a poor season. 4 being below average. 5 and 6 sort of being average, with 6 being a little bit better. 7 being above average. 8 being standout, and then 9, one player gets a 9. I'm sure you can probably guess who it is, being, you know, the best player and sort of the player that would be lost without really. So that's sort of the scale. Like I said, I haven't matched any of this on statistics or on, you know, players' goals or assists or pass completion or any of that sort of crap. I've just matched it on what I believe and how I believe these players have performed this season. So anyway, getting straight into it then, we'll start with the goalkeepers. Obviously, Jordan Pickford played all 38 games of the Premier League season this season. I've given him a 4 out of 10. Below average, not impressed with Jordan Pickford whatsoever this season. He's had some games where he's looked good. He's had some games where he's looked threatening. He's had some games where he's made some really, really good saves. But then he usually undoes it with a stupid mistake, you know, near enough straight afterwards within the same game. Either that or the game afterwards he makes a couple of really bad errors, or, you know, he does something that's really, really frustrating and quite annoying, and I just don't think he's had a good season whatsoever for me. Inconsistency is a word that I would describe Jordan Pickford's season, and I think I used the same word to describe his season last season. He's just inconsistent. One week he has a decent game, the next week he has a dreadful game. 1 minute he's making a world-class save, the next minute he's letting a ball go under his, you know, under his body, or he's having to clear one off the line and then smiling at the camera because a tame shot has literally beaten him. And it's not good enough. We need consistency in that goalkeeper position, and we also need a player that actually wants to play for the football club, and I'm just not convinced that Jordan Pickford wants to play for the football club. He's had some okay games this season, but he's had more blunders, I think, than he's had decent games. And I think ever since that mistake at Anfield last year, you know, where he let the ball in and, you know, he tried to catch it on the bar, we all know what one. I don't think he's ever been the same, and not only do I think he's lacked confidence, but I also think he just appears like he doesn't really care if he makes a mistake. He doesn't really care if we lose the game. He's just not really interested. So I've gone for a 4 for Jordan Pickford. Some people probably give him lower. In terms of would we keep him, do we need to sell him? I think Everton probably will keep him this summer, purely on the basis is that I think, you know, there's other positions in this team that we're probably going to look at as more of a priority than Jordan Pickford. And if we were to bring in another goalkeeper, certainly a goalkeeper for a lot of money that, you know, could play as number 1, we would almost have to get rid of Jordan Pickford. And realistically, who's going to spend the money on a player that's as inconsistent as him and makes as many mistakes as him? So I've gone for a 4. Martin Stecklenburg, obviously NA, I don't think he played this season at any point, but I've given him a 7 on sort of the basis that he leaves the football club after 4 years. Obviously, he had that game against Manchester City, which was absolutely fantastic away from home, where he saved the 2 penalties. So I've gone for a 7 for Martin Stecklenburg, just off basic, you know, just off a basis is that he's leaving the football club. But in terms of this season, I don't think he played a game, so can't really mark him. Same with Jonas Lersel, never played this season, come in the summer. Again, we all sort of felt, okay, maybe this is a goalkeeper that could challenge Jordan Pickford. Maybe this is somebody that could, you know, give him a little bit of competition. But he didn't. He ended up, you know, pretty much sitting on the bench for half a season. I think when Duncan Ferguson come in, he was taken off the bench and Martin Stecklenburg was brought back into the matchday squad, and then he ended up going out on loan for the last sort of 3 or 4 months of the season. So Jonas Lersel doesn't get a mark for me, unfortunately. Again, he definitely didn't play a Premier League game. Did he play in a cup competition? I don't think so. Sheamus Coleman, a 7. I thought Sheamus has had an okay season, to be honest with you. Again, it's probably been slightly above average. It's not been anything that's blown anybody's skirt up. I think I read the stats the other day. Not that anything's based off stats, but I think I read the stats the other day. He's got 1 assist this season, no goals. So in terms of what we're used to from Sheamus Coleman, it's nowhere near as good as it used to be. It's nowhere near what, you know, we've come to expect from him. But he's another year older. You know, he's had his fair share of injuries. He's had fitness troubles as well. Obviously, Jabril Sidibe came in this summer to sort of give a little bit of cover at that right back and allow Sheamus to take some time out of the team. And I feel like when Sheamus has played, he's been consistent. Defensively, he's been quite consistent. He hasn't made that many awful mistakes. Yes, he's been caught out a couple of times against players with pace and against players that'll run at him. But overall, he hasn't made any massive howlers, has he? And he hasn't done anything that you think, oh my God, you've had a dreadful season. He's just been probably slightly above average. And that's why he gets a 7 for me. Again, obviously since the lockdown as well, he stepped in. He's played the majority of those games because we didn't see Djibril Sidibe, and I thought he's done okay. He's looked solid in that defence. He struggled last day of the season against Bournemouth with Josh King running at him, but other than that, I thought he's looked quite solid for pretty much the entirety of the season, even at times when he's had to come back into the squad. You know, there was a period where Djibril Sidibe played a series of games, and then Sheamus Coleman come back in and he done really, really well. So again, I've given a 7 for Sheamus Coleman. Djibril Sidibe, then I've gone for the 6. Again, not the worst season of football I've ever seen, but for a player that come in as a right back, which is a member of the defence, he's not great defensively, is he? Let's be perfectly honest. He struggled quite an awful lot defensively, more noticeably that game against Liverpool where he was caught out massively. And I can't remember who it was on the wing for Liverpool, but he just brought the ball down and basically walked into the box because Djibril Sidibe was nowhere to be seen. Going forward, he's done okay. He's broke forward a few times. He put in a lovely few crosses, got a couple of assists to his name as well. He's very direct player. He's definitely a forward-thinking fullback. But defensively, I don't think I could give him the same amount of the same rating, as Sheamus Coleman, because I think Sheamus was just, you know, a little bit better defensively than Djibril Sidibe was. He got caught out a few too many times, and that's probably the reason as to why Everton look like they're not going to bring him in on a permanent because of that reason. So I've given Djibril Sidibe a 6. Leighton Baines, I've given him a 10. Because it's hard not to. He only featured in what, less than 6 games this season. So in terms of his performance, I'd probably give him a 6, maybe a 7 in terms of performance. Again, when he's come in and when he's had to do a job he has. Obviously, he scored that goal against Leicester, which was an absolute peach of a finish. Had a decent bow out as well on the final day of the season, coming on, putting in a really, really good last-ditch tackle, getting forward a couple of times. So performance-wise, I'd probably give him a 7, but I'm giving Leighton Baines a 10 because, you know, it's his last season in an Everton shirt. It's absolutely gutting that we'll never see him play at Goodison Park again, and we'll never see him play live at Goodison Park again, at least not in a professional or, you know, capacity, and at least not in a Premier League capacity. So I've given him probably a 7 for in terms of the performances that he's had when he's come in and what he's had to do. He's done well, he's been solid, he's been consistent when he's had to be, but he hasn't played an awful lot. But a 10 because it's Leighton Baines. Luca Dean, 8. I think Luca Dean's been one of our standout players this season, to be perfectly honest with you, and that's a little bit strange because, you know, a couple of months into the season when we were at Christmas time sort of, and we were really, really struggling under Marco Silva just before Marco Silva got sacked, I think a lot of us were sort of in this boat that Luca Dean hasn't had anywhere near as good as a season as that he had last season, and he hasn't got the goals and he hasn't got as many assists as he had, and he just hadn't been as consistent. But it's mad that we sit here at the end of the Premier League season reviewing the players, and I still think he's been one of our standout players, certainly since the lockdown, certainly since the return of football after the suspension. I think he's been one of our most consistent players, you know, very, very direct, putting balls into the box, trusting the, you know, the forwards, and that ball for Richarlison against Southampton was absolutely brilliant. And again, I just think, you know, what you get from Luca Dean defensively, he probably could do with being a little bit better and working on that a little bit, but going forward, there's not many better left backs in the world than him. You know, breaking forward, his crossing is really, really good, and he has been one of our most consistent players all season. He has been a standout performer, and the fact that we're sitting here saying Luca Dean's season last season was an awful lot better than it has been this season, and he's still one of our standout performers, for me means that the team just overall hasn't been anywhere near good enough this season. But that's nothing new to us, is it? Michael Keane, then I've gone for a 7 for Michael Keane. Thought he's done okay. That score has been massively boosted because of his form since the return of the Premier League after the restart. Thought he was absolutely fantastic after the restart. He come in, obviously he built up a partnership with Mason Holgate, which was very, very good. He then sort of found himself playing next to Jared Branthwaite when Mason got injured. I think he had a game next to Yerry Mina as well, but he was very, very solid throughout that period. Really, really consistent. Everything that was thrown at him he got rid of on the floor. His passing was really, really good. His heading ability was really, really good in the air, and I just thought he's had a pretty solid season, to be perfectly honest with you. Prior to the lockdown, he was in and out the team a little bit. Obviously, you know, we started to see the ability of Mason Holgate just prior to the lockdown as well, so he was in there more consistently. Yerry Mina and him made sort of a partnership. So Michael Keane was sort of left on the bench for a few weeks, certainly when Carlo Ancelotti come in and started to play Mason Holgate in that centre-back role. But for the majority of the season, I think he's been solid. again, that score has massively been boosted up. He'd have probably been an average, maybe 5, maybe 6 at a push, but since that lockdown, he's been phenomenal. He really, really has. Only that game against Bournemouth where I really thought he struggled. In every other game, he's looked really, really solid, really, really composed, and definitely, you know, one of our standout players. So I've given Michael Keane a 7. Yerry Mina a 6. Again, similar to Michael Keane, but on the other side of the scale, you know, done okay for the start of the season, you know, settled in and was performing quite well, but then injuries hit him. Obviously, we haven't seen him very much since the return of football after the lockdown because of injuries and because of fitness issues. And I just think that Yerry Mina has been played with another season where you look back at and think, again, he's okay when he's fit, he's okay when he's ready, and he's okay when he's 100%, you know, able to step in and play 90 minutes, but you don't get that often out of Yerry Mina. You know, he got injured doing step overs for, you know, in the last couple of weeks of the season. So for me, again, a little bit like Pickford, I think he just needs to be a bit more consistent. And I know the injuries aren't his fault, and I know he can't do much for the injuries, but I just think that, you know, again, we could do with a bit more consistency out of Yerry Mina. When he's on his game, he's really, really solid. He looks good, he looks strong, but, you know, when he's injured and when he's not playing, you know, he spends months and months out on the injury bed. So I've gone for Yerry Mina at a 6. Mason Holgate an 8, another one of our standout performers this season. Obviously come back off the loan deal with West Bromwich Albion in the summer, stepped in, you know, really sort of got underway under Duncan Ferguson and Carlo Ancelotti. They put a lot of faith in him, and he repaid that faith. He's been absolutely fantastic since Christmas and onwards up until last week, last game of the season. He's been absolutely unbelievable, and again, he picked up a little injury during the lockdown, and he had to, you know, remain out of the last couple of games, but regardless of that, he's looked our best centre-half by a country mile this season. He's looked the most composed, he's looked the strongest, he's looked the most confident, he's just looked the best. And I think him with Luca Dean, as well as a couple of other players that I'll mention in a second, I think they've been our standout performers massively this season, and I think he definitely deserves a lot of credit. Jared Branthwaite then, I've gone for a 7. Again, you can't really judge him for the season. Obviously, he come in January, he only played from after the lockdown. I think the game against Aston Villa, the game against Wolves was his first appearance, and then the game against Aston Villa, but he done really well in both of those games. Really solid performances, looked strong, looked assured, looked confident, looked like he wasn't going to get bullied, he wasn't going to get overran. Again, struggled a little bit in that game against Bournemouth, last game of the season, but I think everybody did. But again, I've given him a 7 purely because of his performances. You can only really judge Jared Branthwaite obviously after January because that's when he signed, but I think every time he's come into the first team, he's done a solid job, and he's done really well. Tom Davies then a 4. Not impressed with Tom Davies whatsoever this season. Really not impressed with Tom Davies. I just think he's been poor. I really do. I just think he's been just poor. I do. Again, I'm just not impressed with him. I'm just not sure if he's a player that'll be able to keep it up and play consistently in the Premier League. Certainly not starting in the Premier League. He's not good enough to start Premier League games of football for Everton. He just isn't. Again, ability on the ball, he's not a bad footballer, but he just hasn't got the strength, he just hasn't got the awareness, he doesn't get about the pitches enough, he's not quick enough, he hasn't got the agility, he hasn't got the stamina. Again, he's an alright footballer, but again, he hasn't done anything this season to massively blow me skates up, and he's played an awful lot of games of football this season. So Tom Davies, I'm going for a 4. Gylfi Sigurdsson gets a 2. The worst player, in my opinion, to put an Everton shirt on this season. Absolutely atrocious. Considering how well he played last season, and considering how important he was to this Everton squad last season, I just think he's been shocking. Absolutely shocking. 2 goals in the Premier League, or 3 goals in the Premier League, 2 of them being penalties, 2 goals in the Premier League, 1 of them being a penalty, 1 of them being a great goal against West Ham, to be fair, but that was the only thing he done. And it's the lack of effort, it's the lack of urgency, it's the lack of intensity, it's the lack of care, it's the lack of anything that he shows on the pitch. He just may as well not be there. He went 17 minutes in a Merseyside derby without touching the ball, playing in the centre of midfield, which is just utterly embarrassing. So yeah, Gylfi gets a 2 for me, and I just don't think he can get anything more. And to be honest, I think he's probably his time's up in an Everton shirt now. Morgan Schneiderlin, I've gone for a 3 for Morgan Schneiderlin. Again, massively below average this season. I think he knew from pretty much the start of the season that he wasn't going to have a future at Everton Football Club. Obviously, only a couple of years left on his contract, and I think he knew from pretty much the first few games that he was probably going to be on the list of players to leave the football club come the summer or January. And again, that was shown in his performances. You know, when he needed to come on, he looked disinterested. You know, obviously Andre Gomes at this point was the main midfielder, was the first choice midfielder alongside, you know, either Tom Davies or Gylfi Sigurdsson. So, you know, Morgan Schneiderlin was very much a player that had come on even when needed, and you know, he was walking around the pitch, he didn't seem interested, he was backing out the challenges. Again, he looked like a player who wasn't really interested because he was coming towards the end of his career. Having said that, I thought Morgan Schneiderlin improved, to be honest with you, towards the back end of his Everton career. It was when Andre Gomes picked up that injury against Tottenham and Morgan Schneiderlin had to come into the team. I felt like he was you know, the best midfielder that we'd had seen in an Everton shirt in a while, and that doesn't take an awful lot because the rest of them were absolutely dross. But he come in and he actually gave a little bit of effort, he gave a little bit of fight. His passing range was a lot better than anything we'd seen, certainly from Andre Gomes, who hadn't impressed even prior to the injury. You know, he was performing better than Tom Davies, he was performing better than Gylfi Sigurdsson. So again, you know, just before his move, I thought he improved, but obviously it was too late at that point, and he, you know, he was already planning on leaving the football club, and since then has left the football club. But from the start of the season, wasn't really impressed. Yes, he upped it a little bit, but again, it meant nothing ultimately because he ended up leaving, and you know, even his better performances weren't, you know, the best performances you've ever seen. So I've given him a 3. Andre Gomes, I've gone for a 5 again. Bang average for me this season. He started well, obviously, brought in the summer, Marcel Brands brought him in, you know, because we had a fantastic loan spell last season, and a lot of Evertonians were very, very impressed with him. He come in, he started okay. Again, there was fitness issues, there was worries about fitness here and there, but he started genuinely okay. And then obviously, even just before the injury, I'd say 2 or 3 weeks before the injury, he started to struggle a little bit, and there was worries around his fitness and whether or not he's fit, or whether or not he picked up a little injury in training. He wasn't performing like we know he can. I think this season, Andre Gomes has struggled massively because he hasn't had the player next to him in Idrissa Gana Gueye. The loss of Idrissa Gana Gueye in the summer was massive for the football club, and I think it impacted Andre Gomes probably more than it impacted any other player. Last season he was in a midfield where he had somebody next to him who'd do the running round, who'd do the dog work, who'd get about the pitch, who'd throw the audible tackles in, who'd make it hard for opposition teams, and all Andre Gomes had to do was stand in that midfield looking nice, spray a ball left, right and centre, and you know, his technical ability then would take us forward. He didn't have to do the dog work, he didn't have to get about, he didn't have to work hard. This season he's come into it, and obviously the ideal situation was that he'd play next to Jean-Philippe Gbamin, and that he'd have that sort of Idrissa Gana Gueye like figure, if you like, next to him. But that hasn't been the case whatsoever. You know, he's ended up coming in, he's been playing next to average midfielders, whether it be Gylfi Sigurdsson, whether it be Morgan Schneiderlin, whether it be Tom Davies, and he struggled massively because of that. And like I said, I think he started okay, but then 2, 3, 4 weeks before the injury, I think he started to really show that he can't play in that midfield next to those type of players. They're not good enough, and it almost sort of sells him out a little bit and shows his you know, his inability in certain situations. And then obviously he had that massive injury, and I just think he was rushed back too quickly, and I don't think he ever recovered from that. I don't think you know, the performance against Sheffield United was probably Andre Gomes' best performance since prior to the injury, and the others weren't average or okay, the others were pretty poor. So I've gone for a 5 for Andre Gomes this season. Jean-Philippe Gbamin, I nearly give him an NA because you know, it's really impossible to judge him, isn't it? But I give him a 3 purely for the first couple of games that he played. He looked okay, he didn't look fit, but neither did any of them. It was the start of the season, but I just didn't want to give him a non-scorer because, again, he played in a couple of games this season, didn't he? So I've given him a 3. Not much to say about Jean-Philippe Gbamin. Obviously, he spent 99% of the season out injured. Fabian Delph, 3 as well. Massively unimpressed with Fabian Delph this season. In fact, I'd be selling him in the transfer window straight away. He'd be one of the first players who I'd be looking to sell. He come in as this player who was promised to bring all of this experience, and we were hoping that he'd have a Gareth Barry-like effect on the team, where he'd come in and he'd have the effects of winning the Premier League and being in a side that were very successful under a very successful manager, and he'd come in and he'd be able to sort of feed that throughout the team, but he didn't. All he's done really is put in average performances, spend most of his time on the injury bed, and argue with fans. And that's what he's done. He hasn't put one amazing performance in. His first couple of games were okay, looked, you know, alright, he looked decent. But then after that, he picked up injury after injury. He was then had the stuff with the fans where he was arguing, where he was in people's faces and he was calling people children over social media because they weren't happy with his attitude. And I just think he's had a bad start to his Everton career, and I think it's probably over now. I don't think there's any coming back really for Fabian Delph. I'd move along pretty much straight away. I just don't think he's got a future at the football club again. Didn't soak himself in a load of glory, obviously, when he had the arguments with fans, certainly after the fact that his performances weren't that great, as well as the fact that he spent a lot of time injured. So Fabian Delph have gone for a 3, and I will be selling him in the summer. Alex Iwobi 4. Massively unimpressed with Alex Moby. Again, it's a common theme throughout this video, isn't it? Started okay, got a couple of goals in his first 2 games, and then just massively tailed off again, similar to Andre Gomez. Probably had one decent game of memory, and that was the game against Norwich. But other than that, just average, not good enough. He's not a winger for the start, and he's played most of his games since he's been at Everton on that side of the pitch. Whether it be the left or the right, he's played on the wing. He's not a winger, he's a centre midfielder. When he's played through the centre of the midfield, he's looked okay. He hasn't looked unbelievable, he hasn't looked the best player in the world, but he's looked okay. But again, he's just poor. Most of the time, his touch hasn't been great for pretty much the entirety of the season. He hasn't impressed me whatsoever. You know, defensively, he doesn't really offer much getting forward. Again, his final ball's poor an awful lot of the time. He just hasn't had a good season whatsoever. And I think if you were to give Alex Iwobi anything more than a 4 or a 5, I think you'd probably be doing him. You'd be overrating him there, because he just hasn't had a great season. Like I said, he started okay, come in. A lot of people were willing to give him a chance, but a lot of people thought that he was, massively overpriced at the time. And I agree. I think he was probably massively overpriced. But to be fair to the lad, he hasn't played in a natural position for pretty much the entirety of the season, and he showed that, and you can clearly see that in his performances. Anthony Gordon a 7 again, pretty much like Jared Branthwaite, a little bit, obviously different to Jared Branthwaite. That you can only really mark Anthony Gordon from after Duncan Ferguson's time at the football club, so the last sort of 5-6 months of the season. He come in, Duncan Ferguson give him a lot of trust, put a lot of faith in him, and he impressed. He really did impress. Obviously got that one Premier League assist against Leicester, fantastic ball across the middle, Richarlison finished it, and he's looked threatening. And certainly after the suspension of football and after the lockdown, he looked like probably one of the only Everton players that wanted to bring us forward, one of the only Everton players that wanted to impact the game, that looked interested in leading us to victory and wanting to win. So listen, for me, Anthony Gordon gets a 7 again. Hard to rate him for the entirety of the season because we only seen him towards the back end, but I thought when we have seen him, he's really impressed, and I think he's got a big future at the football club. Theo Walker 4 again. 2 Premier League goals this season, one of them coming a couple of weeks ago, obviously in the game against Aston Villa within the last couple of minutes or so. Just not impressed with him again this season. There's a common theme again of players that I just haven't been impressed with. Just not good enough, not consistent enough, doesn't do enough. He's a winger that's played an awful lot of games this season, and to say that he's come away from the Premier League campaign with 2 goals, it's not good enough whatsoever. It's quite embarrassing, to be perfectly honest with you. Again, I quite like Theo, and I rate him more than I rate somebody like an Iwobi or a Bernard, because I think he's always given it 110%, and I think he's more direct than any other player that we've got that plays on the wing. He gets down the wings, he tries to put balls into the box, but his final ball is not good enough, and he just doesn't get on the score sheet anywhere near enough. And I think, again, in terms of seasons, we're probably going to be after looking at maybe selling Theo Walker on and maybe bringing in some money for him, because he's not good enough, is he? Let's be perfectly honest. He's not consistent enough. He doesn't do it often enough. And for the wages he's on and the money that we brought him in on, it's poor. It really is poor. Bernard 3. Shocking season for me, absolutely shocking season. Again, I think he scored 4 goals this season, might have even been 3, few assists as well. Again, started the season okay, obviously had that game against West Ham where he scored that really ticky goal, and then he scored the volley as well when the ball come in, really neat volley. But pretty much after Christmas, November time, he just didn't really do anything, did he? He's been involved off the bench a couple of times where he's had to come on and he's had to make a little bit of an impact, but he hasn't made an impact, has he? Let's be perfectly honest, he hasn't made an impact. He hasn't done anything massively of note, and that's disappointing for me, because I think Bernard's got a lot of talent and he's got a lot of ability and he's got a lot of flair, but I just don't think he's quick enough for it, and not quick enough. I just don't think he's physical enough for this league. I just don't think this league suits him whatsoever, and you can see that, and that's become quite evident. You know, certainly over the last sort of couple of months or so, and I think Bernard's probably another player that if we get a decent bid for, we should be looking at potentially moving on. Richarlison, 9. He is the standout player this season. He's the only player to get a 9. Again, 15 league goals, some fantastic goals in there as well. You only have to look at since the lockdown. You know, the header against Sheffield United a couple of days ago, which was a fantastic goal. The goal against Leicester, the goal against Southampton where Luca Dean put the ball in and he volleyed it, brilliant goal. Even the goal against Leicester, fantastic. Crystal Palace, he scored a really good one where he took the ball from pretty much our own half and curled it in. He's been the standout performer, and he's been the absolute standout performer, and he made some comments which I'd say put a little bit of fear into some Evertonians yesterday, and we spoke about them on the Toffee Blues live stream. I'll be putting a clip of that up on the channel a little bit later on, so you'll be able to see that. But I think now it's down to Everton to match the ambition of Richarlison, and now it's down to Everton to really you know, bring in the quality that he deserves to have next to him. He doesn't deserve to be a player playing in a side that's finishing 12th. He doesn't deserve to be a player playing in a mid-table Premier League club. He deserves to be fighting in Europe. He deserves to be playing in the Champions League because he is good enough. And again, he's shown this season 15 league goals with very little creativity around him, very little quality around him. You know, it's fantastic, and I think he deserves all of the plaudits in the world. So he gets a 9 for me. Moise Keane, 6 again. Obviously, he hasn't had the season that we all wanted him to have. When he's come in over the last sort of couple of weeks, he's done okay. Obviously, scoring against Bournemouth in the last game of the season. He's had 2 starts where I think he's looked really good. The one against Newcastle and the one against Sheffield United, where he's been probably man of the match in both of those games. And he scored in both of those games, as well as only 2 goals for Everton. But obviously, you know, he had the situation with Duncan Ferguson against Manchester United, where he was brought off the bench and then substituted again only 18 minutes later or something like that. He's had a couple of off the pitch incidents which have brought his attitude into question as well, and he just hasn't settled like we would have wanted him to, probably as being expected, considering he was a young 19-year-old lad coming into a completely new league, you know, playing for a side that, you know, obviously was very different for him. But I think we all sort of, as Evertonians, we had these mad expectations from Moise Keane to tear the Premier League up and become the best thing since sliced bread, and it hasn't quite happened for him. I'm happy with him, and I'm happy for Moise Keane to be an Everton player next season, and for us to really work on his development with Carlo Ancelotti, and hopefully he'll massively improve next season. But again, I think you'd struggle to give him any more than a 6, maybe a 7 a push, because, you know, for most of the games that he's featured in, he's done very little, or he's been average, and he's had a couple of decent games. But again, he hasn't had an awful lot of starts, he hasn't had an awful lot of opportunities, so I've gone for a 6. Calvert-Lewin, an 8. Again, another one of our standout performers, I think, this season. Massively improved from last season. Okay, since the lockdown, he hasn't had a fantastic time whatsoever. He's struggled, but in terms of a season as a whole, massively improved. Obviously scored some really important goals for us. I think he's started to learn the craft of being a striker a little bit more, and being in the right place at the right time, and getting on the end of balls, and, you know, if a ball ricochets off the post, being there to knock it in. And I think he's learned that over the last sort of 6 to 12 months or so, and he's massively improved this season again with Mason Holgate, with Luca Dean. I think they've all been our standout players, with Richarlison being sort of the best out of the lot. But I've been massively impressed with Dominic Calvert-Lewin next season. I think he's got a lot to learn still, don't get me wrong, and he's got a long way to go. He's going to be a top quality striker, but I think he's got all of the potential in the world, and I think with his work rate, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if he hits those levels, and I think we're going to see another season from Dominic Calvert-Lewin next season where he improves. He's improved in every season he's been in Everton in terms of, you know, statistically his goal return has improved every season he's been in Everton, and I also think his performances have as well, and I think he's had a really good season this season. Going on to some of the, you know, non-starters then, Nias and Martin are a 2. They played in a couple of games, they were shite, but they get 2s. Tosin a 4, just purely because he scored that goal against Tottenham, really, where we really needed it in an audible game against the audible side. But other than that, obviously spent a lot of time on loan at Crystal Palace. Started the season probably with the view of him being in and around the first team, but it quickly became evident that he wasn't good enough, and he didn't have the ability, and he wasn't quick enough. Dominic Calvert-Lewin obviously coming in and playing the majority of the season as the striker. And again, Benny Beningham's down here, but I've given him an NA because I just don't think he featured, did he, in any game? Obviously he was on the bench an awful lot since the lockdown, but I just don't think he featured. Anyway, that is going to do it for today's video. If you have enjoyed, please do hit that like button. It means a massive amount to me. We were originally meant to be doing the season season review today. First part of the season review today, second part on Friday. I've switched it up a little bit. We're going to have this video out today, and then we'll have the season review out on Friday. We might do it as one big live stream. We might cut it into 2 parts, who knows. But I just thought I'd change the plan a little bit. We'll also have that little clip of the live stream from the Toffee Blues live stream yesterday up a little bit later on, so check that out, my thoughts on Richarlison as well as Jordan's. If you've enjoyed, please do hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well. We'll be back on Friday 5:15 for another live stream. I hope you all have enjoyed. Have a fantastic day. Leave a like if you've enjoyed, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and we'll see you soon on the Mighty Blues.